Hi, welcome back to Behind the Lines. I'm Lynn Saturnow. This is my co-host, Bob Greenberg. Bob, on Monday had something different than I've never done before. I spoke with the Curbstone Coaches over in Canfield. That's a group that's been around since the 1950s. And they told me that I'm the first person from Pennsylvania ever to go over there and speak. That didn't make much sense.
Wow. Well, I've heard all about that organization, but have never been there either. So that's pretty amazing.
And Ryan Briggs is going to speak there next week. How about that?
Wow.
2 in a row.
He's following you. That's some big shoes to fill.
Yeah, but one of the things was the one question that a guy asked, and I had a ton of questions. He said, how about explaining that playoff system over there in Pennsylvania where these teams lose and they're still going on? Because in Ohio, of course, everybody makes the playoffs, but once you lose, you're done.
And in PA, it's gotten to the point where you could lose twice in the playoffs in a row and still make it to the state tournament.
Yeah, it's a little crazy, isn't it?
It's and then now if consolation games aren't enough to confuse people from Ohio, now we have these sub-regional games where you can play in a sub-regional and lose in the sub-regional and still make it over to the state tournament. I know I've talked to some of the Youngstown media guys over the years, and I just tell them, if you guys can figure this system out, then you are officially media types for PA basketball, because it's impossible.
And it got worse once they went to 6 classes.
It's it's a world where we have opt-outs, we have open tournaments, we have 6 classes, we have consolation games. You can lose back-to-back games. At least in wrestling, where you can lose multiple matches in wrestling and move on, but that has always historically, individually, that's really never been a problem. In track, if you take second or third, you move on. But in a team sport, there's just something, it's so unusual to see teams lose once or twice and still move on. It still never sits well with me.
And I think one of the things, though, I explained to them, football, basketball, and wrestling are the only 3 sports that make money. And so they have to subsidize all the other sports. And so in a way, it's kind of understanding how they try to bring more teams in those sports to try to bring in more money.
That is true, which makes the fact that the PWA and the districts are all losing money now since they've gone to 6 classes. It makes it very interesting, because the whole, and you're right, the intent of adding more teams was the thought that they'd get more public schools playing for state championships, deep into the playoffs, bigger crowds, and that has not happened.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame. And you and I talked about, even like District 10 has to make more money, so they actually charge more for tickets for basketball and wrestling than the PIA does.
More, and they charge more, and they also don't charge student prices, which has always been a big a beef of mine, and I know Pete Iacino and I have gone back and forth on the debate over this. I understand why, but I don't like it. I think students should be getting a break at every level at this time of year, but it is what it is.
It's very hard for a family to go, like for the wrestling tournaments. It was $22 for a ticket for all sessions, and no student tickets, so the kids had to pay $22 too. If your kid's wrestling, you have maybe two siblings and your 2 parents, $88 to go watch your kid wrestle. Some families probably couldn't even afford to pay for their the kids to go.
It's a tough kind of juggling act for the district and the PWA at this point, because they are losing some money. They have to find maybe a more of a creative way to make some of these games more attractive. As an example, last night we had 10 Mercer County boys teams playing games all over the place. And if some of those games may have been on Monday or tonight, you'd imagine there'd be a lot more tickets sold, and there may be a way for the district to make some more money. The issue is, in my mind, Lynn, is the fact that the state has expanded, but they're still running their tournaments like we're back in the 1980s.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
They need to be more creative with the dates and the scheduling. Forget about everything being on Tuesday and Friday. I think they just got to be more creative. And if they do that, I think they could definitely sell more tickets and get more fans into the gyms.
Yeah, I think you're right. They could balance it out a little bit better than they have been doing. And especially not with so many teams. Mercer County has always been a hotbed for basketball, of course. And so we have all these teams going on. I think we have 18 teams who made it to the semifinals at least.
Correct.
Of course, the biggest one is in boys 2A, where all 4 of our teams played last night. Farrell took on Middlesex and Lakeview played Wilmington. The thing is, all 4 are going to moved on to to the finals on Friday.
And the
Finals and
consolations.
consolation game. And all four are going on to the PIA tournament, so those games really didn't matter a whole lot.
I talked to Chad Mild about it on Monday, and they don't matter in the big scheme of things because they all know they're going to be playing in the first weekend in March. But they're all playing for pride. But it is interesting that you get to that point. I'm not surprised because one of the benefits of 6 classes has been Mercer County because the fields are a little bit smaller. They're spread out a little bit more now. So our teams who have historically done very well in wrestling and football and basketball are really getting rewarded now because there are not as many teams, and now they're playing against each other to have to knock each other off.
Of course, Kennedy Catholic moved on last night in Class 6A, which as expected. They already won the District 10 title, and they were playing a sub-regional game, which was one of the things you talked about that's kind of confusing.
It's confusing to the point where I think about this. Kennedy won the District 10 title a week ago today, and they went, I think, 3 or 4 or 5 days without even knowing who their opponent was because the sub-regional has multiple districts included. They have a point system. Those games weren't played yet. So it's unusual because in at this time of year, you could kind of figure out who you're playing next. But Kennedy did not know. Not that they needed it that much, but still, you want to try to level the playing field. And it's a whole new world when it comes to high school athletics here in Pennsylvania. And I don't know if it's going to get any better.
Yeah, in Class AAA, Sharon and Sharpsville were still alive along with Fairview and Mercyhurst Prep. 3 of those will be moving on from this weekend coming up.
Yeah, and I think that at least from that aspect where you're going to have to win your consolation game to get into the state playoffs. I've never been a fan of having the 4th place teams getting in. I understand why they do that, and even you look down at the WPIL. They kind of have gotten away from some of these consolation games. You just kind of follow the team in your bracket. Is that the best thing to do? I don't know. I'm sure teams would rather play, but it's a formula now where a lot of teams are playing. There's a lot of games, and we do the best to cover them all.
And the thing is, every district is different the way they set up their playoffs and who advances into the tournament.
There's always been a talk about that. I think that's a good point. You look at Ohio, and you mentioned Ohio, that Ohio is run from top down, where the Ohio, their high school association runs their tournaments and runs their state. In PA, it's the opposite. The districts run their individual districts, and then they help assist the PWA, but it's totally different, and it's confusing for a lot of people, and each district has their own benefits and how do they make more money, and they get rewarded for what they do, and it does make it challenging at this time of year.
Yeah, in that class, how about that Sharpsville game the other night? Triple overtime victory over Erie First. That was a classic.
One of the all-time best games that I've seen. Sharpsville up 17 points in the 4th quarter and saw that lead go away. And then you saw Erie First make a couple 3-pointers in the waning seconds to extend the overtime. I mean, for Matt DeRisco and that team to survive that game and win, that's one they'll think about for a long time, I'm sure.
And I'm really happy Sharpsville won, but I felt bad for that poor Erie First kid at the foul line in the 3rd overtime. Down by 1 point, and he misses 2 free throws. It's a tough blow.
That end of that game was, and you think about it, how there's so many little storylines to that. Was first off, you always hear that you don't want the officials to determine the outcome of a game, but in that scenario, if the official does not call a foul, the Erie First kid was tackled on that play, then the official would have been criticized for not calling a foul. So he did the right job. You feel bad for the kid, but he had his chance. And obviously it didn't work out, and the Sharpsville Blue Devil basketball team got rewarded, and they're still playing today.
Yeah, and in Class 4A, the 4 teams left: Grove City, Hickory, Titusville, and Harbor Creek. Same thing there. 3 of them are going to move on.
Yeah, and I think Hickory and Grove City have been in the discussions all year long, and I think at this point, Hickory looking to win their first district title in a couple decades. I will be not shocked if they don't win it on Friday night, but they've had a great year. I mean, Chris Mell and that team has been consistent. And you think about it, they had one bad quarter, the 2nd quarter against Sharon at Sharon, or they would be undefeated right now.
Yeah, that is impressive.
It is, and that's something that does not happen every day.
Yeah. Girls action. Yeah. How about Kennedy and Farrell? They're the only 2 teams that were in the playoffs in Class 1A. They've been off for what, 12 days? More than that?
They will be off
play Saturday.
12 and 16 days between them. They play Saturday, and then the winner gets to move on and have another week off before their next game. So the winner, if it's Kennedy, will play one game in 19 days, or Farrell one game in 23 days. And that is the system we have when the districts run their tournaments, and they're not somewhat of a regional type tournament, which I would love to see, where the smaller classes like single A would join up with other districts and play a bigger regional tournament. I don't know if we'll see that in our lifetime, but it would definitely benefit teams like Kennedy and Farrell and the smaller districts that have really small groups of teams. And I think it would be beneficial to everybody and more enjoyable for sure.
Or they could do sub-regionals.
More sub-regional.
That's all we need.
That's what we need.
Oh, gosh. How about the other local teams that play tonight? All the girls' games are tonight. West Middlesex is going for a 4th straight District 10 title, meets Cambridge Springs. And I've seen both teams, and I'd say Ms. Reds are favored in this one by a bunch.
Yeah, and that's, it's interesting, that bracket, because the much ballyhooed story about Iroquois, who had 3 sisters, triplets that transferred over, were ineligible to play in the playoffs. They were the best team up there all year, so they played in the tournament, got hammered. If things were different, Cambridge Springs probably would have been on the other side of the bracket, and so the 2 best teams in this class right now are playing tonight. Not fair to either one of the teams, but it is what it is at this stage of the game.
And on a good point, 3 of them are going on.
Correct.
Yeah, so that makes a difference. That Iroquois thing, actually, those are quadruplets.
Quadruplets.
Only three of them play basketball.
3 girls and 1 boy, correct.
Yeah. And he's still at McDowell.
Still in McDowell. seven kids to that family. God bless the mother and father trying to figure out how to get their kids in and out of school and whatever they do. God bless them.
And in a way, it's understandable. Their dad took over as head coach at Iroquois, the girls program.
No, he actually is coaching the boys.
The boys. I'm sorry. Right.
So that's a debate for another day. I mean, I think from a parent's perspective, just trying to get kids home after school, after practice, and if the father went to Iroquois, it might make his life and their family's life easier if the girls were there playing there in that same school as well. But we can debate that topic someday down the road.
Yeah. In AAA, Greenville takes on Fairview tonight, and Lakeview goes against Mercyhurst Prep. A couple of interesting games.
Lakeview's the one that's really had a great year. Gary Burke and that squad, I don't think many people thought they'd be at this stage right now. They will have their hands full tonight. Greenville, another story. On the other side, we knew they were going to have a good year. Coach Richards has done a fantastic job. Won't be easy tonight for Greenville, but I like their chances. And if it's Greenville, Mercyhurst Prep in the championship game on Saturday, that will be a classic.
Yeah, I think that'll be a really good one if they both reach it that far.
I wouldn't count out Lakeview, though.
Oh, no, that's a dark horse team. I mean, I've seen some up games for them and some really down games. So, but Gary Burke is very experienced, and he'll have them ready.
You always go back to the old, and you hear this all the time, Lynn, where you have people will say it's always about the players. You got to have the players to win, and that's true. But give me a great coach once in a while who can find ways to win, like Gary Burke, who's done this year. I think great coaches are as important in a lot of cases as having the best players.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And we have some great coaches up in 5A too. Tonight Hickory takes on Slippery Rock, and Warren goes against General McLean.
Rematches from be the third matchups between both of those teams. Hickory and Slippery Rock split this year. One of the more interesting matchups you ever see, Lynn, because I don't remember many times ever covering high school games where there was a 49-point difference between the first matchup, Slippery Rock beating Hickory by 39, to the second matchup when Hickory beat Slippery Rock by 10. I mean, 49-point difference. Slippery Rock's still the favorite in my mind tonight. They're the defending champs, and they've had a much more consistent year. But Hickory's playing very well. They're very emotional, trying to kind of use that emotion of the tragedy in that school district. And I wouldn't count out Hickory tonight.
And on a good note, all 3 move on. I mean, 3 out of the 4
3 out of the 4 move on,
so
correct.
Even if one of them, it's a shame they play each other, but even if one loses, they'll move
on. It won't be easy because McLean and Warren are both having very good years, and whoever plays those games on Saturday will have their hands full for sure.
Congratulations to Casey Taylor and the Reynolds High wrestling team. They won their 25th District 10 title last weekend.
The story for me was not that Reynolds did their thing, but the story for me was Greenville having 4 District 10 champions. That might be a record for that program, the long-time legendary program, and I think that alone shows me that maybe not that teams are getting closer to Reynolds, but at least this year competition in District 10 was very competitive, and it made it very tough for Reynolds. Not as easy as we've seen in the past.
Yeah, this was one of the better tournaments. It was very, very well balanced, as Greenville coach John Reynolds said. And the Greenville, they really turned it up in the finals.
I know one thing. My son David tried to go out Friday night to grab a meal with his friends. Couldn't get into half the places in town.
Yeah.
It was jammed. It'll be jammed again this weekend because you're going to have regionals, which a lot of people will be staying overnight. Then you're going to have a bunch of basketball games on Friday and Saturday. So it's another jam-packed weekend here in the community.
Yeah, and I bet that's a great thing for the community. That's one of the things. Sports generate money for your community, these teams coming into town.
And you're right about that. And it would be a good study someday to get the exact numbers that how it benefits Mercer County. But for all the naysayers out there that always criticize and say too much time and energy and money put into sports, there's definitely a benefit for our community, and we're definitely seeing it here last weekend and seeing it this weekend.
Yeah, and Bo Bayless won a 4th title. That's a rare thing. That's a great accomplishment for Reynolds, for any wrestler. Of course, Bo is from Reynolds.
Yeah, it means you have to win it as a freshman, which is not easy. And you think about Bo, I know the match wasn't easy. I wonder if there was some pressure on him going into that finals. He battled, but he won, but still wasn't an easy match for him.
Well, it was, this Hunter Thompson, he's a good wrestler. This kid from Titusville. They had a good game plan to try to stay off the bottom because Bo's vicious on top. I mean, he'll turn guys right and left. And so they had a good game plan going in. It was a very physical match.
For any wrestler at Reynolds to stand out historically, like Bo is doing this year, it means you're special because Reynolds has a long laundry list of wrestlers that have had amazing careers, and Bo's now part of that group.
And to win 4 titles, it's hard to win 1 in District 10 because that means you're the best in northwestern Pennsylvania, which is a hotbed of wrestling. And to win 4, Casey Taylor, 3-time state champ, he only won 2 at districts. That just shows you how hard it is.
You got to be healthy. You got to, you have to make weight. You have to deal with a lot of different variables at that time of year, each year of your high school career, and you're dealing with a lot of different kids who are coming after you. So yeah, there's no question. One of the more impressive, I think, any accomplishments that we have in Mercer County, one of them is if you win 4 District 10 titles in wrestling, that's very special.
Yeah, and the sad part was, there was some booing going on because they didn't like a couple of the referees' calls. And when Bo was on the stand, and now I know they really weren't booing him individually, but they were booing the program because they don't like Reynolds because they win so much. They're booing the referees' calls, which were good calls, but there's always differential.
You know what? That's the one of those double-edged swords if you're the Reynolds of the world or the Kennedy Catholics of the world. But when you win so much, you're like the Duke basketball team. When you win so much, you have your haters and your fans, and that's just part of winning. I think that's something. Notre Dame football is the same way.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Reynolds would rather have the wins, and they'll deal with some of the boos.
No, I remember when Kennedy had a wrestling program, they booed Kennedy too.
That's true.
My son Joel Jarosky, he got booed all the time. He loved it. It kind of fired him up.
And I think most athletes and competitors do like that challenge. So I know Ed Farrell read a story this week about Ethan Porterfield, how he was being harassed by some of the Girard fans last weekend, and most competitors enjoy that, and Ethan did for sure.
But the thing is, when you win 4 titles and you're standing on the medal stand, nobody should be booing a kid that does that well.
That's bad.
Especially somebody as humble as Bo Bayless.
I agree.
A guy that's going to Harvard, super smart kid, super good athlete. No kid deserves to be booed in the first place.
I 100% agree. But Bo will get the last laugh. He's going to Harvard. He's going to probably have a very good life. So
I would think so.
Yeah, congrats, Bo.
Yeah. And how about indoor track? Jonah Powell from Grove City wins the gold medal, and Brock Grundy from Hickory.
Brock Grundy, and he's won multiple state championships now, indoors and outdoors. Jonah Powell's now won multiple state championships, indoors and outdoors. You had Brian Phillips, who took second in the long jump for Hickory. So a great, really very impressive. Mercer County has not historically done great in the indoors because it's only one class. Only the top athletes get to go to the indoor meet. But congrats to those 3 and the others who also placed. And you'd have to believe all those guys and girls will be favorites when it comes the outdoor season here in a couple months.
Yeah, and the District 10 diving championships were last weekend. Geo Masters of Hickory repeated as a titleist.
Gio's one of those athletes that don't get a lot of press because he's in a couple sports. I know he does some winter sports with ski jumping and also with diving, but there's no question he deserves it because he's had a great career. He's only a junior, have a chance to win one more year. Then you got the District 10 swimming this weekend, and we have a lot of great athletes out of Mercer County going up to Spire. So it's a busy time of year. It's tough to keep track of everybody, but I know we all try to do our best.
It's hard. We need more space in the paper. I'll tell you that.
I need more time in a day.
And more people on to help you out in the radio.
Yes.
But this is a great time of year for both of us. I mean, we love this. That's why we still do. We're in this business, and it's great following high school sports.
It definitely energizes us when we go into these gyms and see all these fans and the kids. And when you see our local kids succeed like we're doing now, it's why we do it.
Exactly. We'll be back next week to fill you in on everything that happens. Thanks for showing up.